Hi, my name is Lily and welcome back to my channel, and welcome to my 2022 reading stats and then 2023 goals. So getting straight into it, I read 131 books in total in 2022, which is the highest number of books I've ever read in one year. So that was a total of 38,736 pages over the whole year, and it averaged out to about 11 books a month. So it meant I was reading on average 103 pages a day, but that really varies because there would have been like weekends and evenings where I was able to read entire books and other days where I didn't read at all. And my average rating was about 3.8. I think that's actually a little bit lower than my usual rating, so I think I maybe didn't have as many good reads, but I think I read more broadly this year, which is why I had a lower rating on average. So of all the books that I read this year, only 7 were rereads, and I did read 10 graphic novels, but I did also manage to finish 8 series this year. Now, to give you some perspective, the longest book I read was 816 pages and the shortest was a 23-page novella. This gave an average book length of somewhere between 290 and 310. And in general, I took between 2 to 5 days to read a book. That also included 42 audiobooks, which totaled over 419 hours of audiobook. But of course, remember, I don't listen to them on one-time speed. The shortest audiobook I listened to was a non-fiction at 2 hours long, and the longest was Crescent City, which is 27 hours long. So I got some charts to put up on the screen for you from my reading tracker. This reading tracker is originally built around the Core Pal tracker, but each year I change it and adapt it for my own needs to the point now that it's basically my own spreadsheet. So you can see I started off January really strong. This is quite common for me because I really get the reading bug in January because I get to see the stats change more dramatically at the beginning of the year in the spreadsheet, and also it's a clean slate and I really want to get those numbers up. You can see it rising and falling throughout the year. It dropped off mostly when I was doing interviews for work in July, and then again in November when I was really busy with Christmas stuff. But you can also see that it's actually largely affected by the number of pages I read. So it wasn't just in January I was reading a lot of graphic novels that are really short. I really was reading way more pages than the other months. So for my star ratings, you can see it's actually fairly evenly split, and this year I didn't have any 1-star reads because I've been a lot better at DNFing, so anything that would have got a 1-star was actually DNF this year. I did, however, have 13 books that are 2 stars, and that is 10%, but a lot of those were Kindle Unlimited romances that I read purely for the tropes, and they weren't very good, but they kept my little sad brain going when I was having down moments. I had 38 3 stars, which I think is the highest proportion of 3 stars I've ever had. For me, 3 stars are often more disappointing than 2s because they meant they had good potential, but they just let me down. And yeah, this year, almost a third of them were 3 stars. Now, my biggest proportion this year was 4-star reads, and that was 40 books at 4 stars. That is really good for me. I'm very happy, and I generally really love my 4-star reads. They just didn't quite have that vibe to be 5 stars. And then 39 books at 5 stars, which is incredible. I read some really good books this year, but this does include my rereads. Most of those rereads were probably 5 stars, but I just had a really amazing reading year. But to be honest with you, it was kind of funny because I had so many 4- and 5-star reads. When I sat down to do my best books of the year, I really struggled because I didn't have that many standout reads, and I think it's just because the quality of my reading was actually quite high this year. Now, moving on to genre, as you can see, romance has really dominated my year this year. I realised in 2022 that my brain had switched over and was really in a romance reading mood, and I really went to town reading romance, as you can tell. So if you combine both the romance and the erotica categories, that totals, I think, 81 books were kind of under the romance umbrella. And the reason that some of them are categorized as erotica is because there were a couple that I read that were labeled as romances, but I honestly didn't say they had enough plot to be considered romances. So combined, about 2/3 of my reads were some form of romance, and I had a really great reading year of romance. Unfortunately, I'm now kind of coming out of the romance phase, but I think I'm going to head back into it in summer because I really enjoy those light breezy reads for summer. My next biggest section was fantasy, but I did only read 16 fantasy books this year, which is quite shocking considering in previous years most of my reads were fantasy. And I only read 4 sci-fi books, which, considering that is my favourite genre objectively, that is kind of sad, but I just wasn't in the mood for sci-fi and fantasy this year. And now the remaining ones, so I read maybe 3 or less books. We have mystery, magical realism, literary fiction, horror, biography, non-fiction, dystopia, and contemporaries. So those books I'm actually starting to read a bit more now. This year my reading is already way more diverse in genre, and I'm really enjoying that. I feel like 2022 was the year that I finally let go of my old reading persona that I had, where I felt like I was only a fantasy reader and I only really looked in the fantasy section in the bookshops. Whereas now I look in all the sections and I find that I feel like I know my reading taste a lot better now. Now 2022 was my year of Kindle Unlimited, so 39% of my reads were ebooks and most of those were from Kindle Unlimited. But I still read 37 physical copies. This year, my priority really is to read more of my own backlog and get rid of some more of my TBR backlog because I have so many physical books that I really need to get through them, clear some out. And another big shift this year is that 77%, which was nearly 100 books, were classed as adult books. I have really shifted my reading taste toward adult fiction now. I used to mostly read YA and now I'm just not in the mood for it most of the time. I do occasionally read YA and there are some really great YAs I've still really enjoyed, but I'm leaning more adult now. I did dabble a little bit in middle grade, but this year I've just not been in the mood for it. Now this chart really goes to show why, yes, I did read a lot of books, but I didn't clear much of my backlog because nearly 50% of my books were gifted or free in some form. So a significant proportion were from Kindle Unlimited or NetGalley, and some were gifted or PR copies. Now I did read 5 from book boxes and I think nearly 50 that were my own physical copies. So that is really good going, but I could improve. And you can see it was pretty evenly split between whether it was a first in a series continuation, or a standalone book. I honestly didn't have much of a preference last year because romances, you can kind of dip in and out of the series and not feel bad. Now, like last year, I won't be showing my diversity statistics because it feels a bit performative to do so, but I definitely improved on last year and I will continue to improve this year. And I will show you though my maps. So this first map shows you where the author originated from. So some of them now live in the US, but in their bio say they grew up in a different country. And so I went with the one that they kind of identified themselves as being from. So I read from authors from 14 different countries. And then this map shows that I read books set in 11 different countries. The difficulty I had is so much of the romance genre is all based in the US or Canada. And so I did try to branch out a bit more, but unfortunately, like especially because I was mostly reading Kindle Unlimited because I didn't want to go out and buy a bunch of new physical copies, I found that most of my books were still based in America. But this year I have already broadened out and it is going so much better. And especially now that I'm planning on reading more literary fiction and a bit more fantasy, we'll get a bit more of a broader selection. So considering my goal was to read 52 books, I did really well. I usually always put my goal at 52 books because that'd be 1 book a week and that is a reasonable request to make of myself, and it's something that I can do. This was my biggest reading year yet. I have never read this many books, but 131 is really, really good going. Now, because I did so well and I am in such a reading mood, for 2023, I've actually decided to break my 52 books rule and set my goal to 100. And it's making me nervous because I don't want to feel pressured, but also I think it's going to happen because I have figured out ways to get myself reading more. I have much more healthy reading habits. And yeah, in general, I think it's going to go really, really well. So my other goals for 2023, I try not to set any significant like hard and fast rules for myself, but I do have a few goals in mind. So the first one is I really, really want to focus on clearing out my backlog. So I have hundreds of books waiting to be read and I really need to get to them. So this year I'm trying not to buy as many and being a lot more conscious about what I'm buying, and it is going well so far. And also in my database, I have labelled all of them with a number, and so when I'm not urgently feeling like I want to read a particular one next, I am letting random number generators decide. And it's not that the first one it comes up with I have to pick because I still am a mood reader, but I kind of do a random number generator to kind of flick through it and see what I have and see if it pulls out any that I hadn't thought about, which it has actually done so far and it's worked really, really well. I'm also hoping to read more broadly in genre. So last year, as you saw, I read a lot of romance, and this year I'm kind of thinking like mixing it up a bit more. I definitely want to read some more literary fiction. I'm feeling some more fantasy, but I'm also feeling like some darker reads like horrors and thrillers. So I'm really excited about that and looking forward to exploring more genres a bit more. And my final goal is to continue trying to read more diversely. So it's kind of difficult when you're clearing your own backlog and you've bought it over the years and you're kind of limited by the choice that you already have. But when I am buying new books, I'm trying to make sure that I am prioritizing books that I feel like will help improve my reading diversity as well. So those were my 2022 stats and 2023 goals. I hope you found this interesting. I'm also thinking of doing a walkthrough of my new 2023 reading spreadsheet, so if you're interested, let me know in the comments. Also, let me know, how did your reading year go? How many books did you read? Did you find any interesting stats about it? If you don't want to create your own spreadsheet, you can use Storygraph, which will come up with stats for you. I've been playing around with that this year and I'm enjoying it, but I will say I'm sticking with my own personal spreadsheet because I like the way that I log things. So thank you so much for watching. If you like this video, please give it a like and consider subscribing to see more content from me. All of my social media links are in the description below, and if you'd like to leave me a comment to let me know you were here, leave me some form of graph in the comments below. Thank you again. Bye.